Fiancée threw the maid's toddler's cake away. Minutes later, she begged to save her engagement after one huge mistake. She was 3 years old. She had one birthday cake. And in front of everyone, it was ripped from her tiny hands and thrown on the floor like it was trash. The little girl just stood there, frosting on her shoes. Eyes wide. Too young to understand cruelty, but old enough to feel it. The room went dead silent. Every single person froze. But nobody froze harder than the man standing in the back. The man who had a diamond ring on that woman's finger. What he did next. Nobody in that room will ever forget it. Some people smile at the world, and the world smiles right back. Daniel was one of those people. Daniel Mercer was 40 years old, and if you passed him on the street in Manhattan, you might not know right away that he was worth over $800 million. He didn't wear it on his face. He wore simple clothes. Dark jeans, a clean button-down, good shoes but nothing flashy. He drove himself to work most mornings, a quiet ritual he refused to give up no matter how many assistants offered to send a car. He had built his money the slow way, through real estate, through smart decisions, through a lot of early mornings and late nights and years when he wasn't sure it was going to work. He came from a middle-class family in upstate New York. His mother had been a teacher. His father had worked at a hardware store. They hadn't given him money, but they had given him something better. They gave him the idea that a person's worth was not in their bank account. It was in how they treated the people around them. Daniel carried that belief everywhere. His Manhattan penthouse was enormous, but he never forgot that the doorman downstairs had a sick daughter, or that his housekeeper, Gloria, had come to work in this country 30 years ago with $40 in her pocket and a 3-year-old little girl she was raising alone. He knew these things because he asked. 'Cause he listened. Because to Daniel Mercer, people were not background noise. Gloria had worked for Daniel for 7 years. She was 45 years old, a black woman with strong hands and quiet dignity, and a laugh that could fill a whole room when something was genuinely funny. She took care of his home like it was her own, and Daniel had long stopped thinking of her as an employee. She was, in many ways, part of his world. He had attended her church once when she invited him, sat in the third pew and sang along even though he didn't know the words. Gloria had cried laughing at his attempt. And then there was Lily. Lily was Gloria's granddaughter, her daughter's child, left in Gloria's care after a family difficulty that nobody talked about too much. Lily was 3 years old. She had big brown eyes and the most serious little face you have ever seen on a toddler, the kind of face that looked like she was always solving a very important problem in her mind. But when she smiled, the whole world tilted a little bit. Daniel adored Lily. Whenever Gloria brought her to the penthouse on days when school was closed or care fell through, Daniel would stop whatever he was doing. He would sit on the floor, in his good jeans on his expensive rug, and build block towers with Lily until she knocked them over and dissolved into giggles. His assistant had once walked in on this scene and nearly dropped her laptop. A man worth nearly $1 billion, sitting cross-legged on the floor, making elephant sounds with a 3-year-old. That was Daniel. And then came Vanessa. Vanessa Cole had walked into Daniel's life at a charity gala 18 months ago. She was 32 years old, strikingly beautiful, the kind of woman who entered a room and rearranged it without trying. She had a sharp mind, a sharp wit, and a warmth that, in the beginning, felt completely real. She worked in luxury brand consulting. She knew the right people, the right restaurants, the right things to say. And she had looked at Daniel, really looked at him, in a way that felt rare. They dated for 14 months. And Daniel, a man who had always been careful with his heart, fell completely. He proposed on a Thursday evening in November. Simple. Private. No photographer hiding in the bushes. Just the two of them, a rooftop, the city spread out below like a blanket of lights. Vanessa had said yes before the ring was even fully out of the box. His friends were happy for him. His family was relieved. They had long worried about Daniel being alone. And Gloria, when she heard the news, had hugged him in the kitchen and said quietly, "She better be good to you, Mr. Daniel. You deserve good." He had laughed. "She is, Gloria. She really is. But love has a way of wearing its best clothes in the beginning." The first small sign came about 3 weeks after the engagement. Vanessa had stopped by the penthouse while Gloria was cleaning the kitchen. Lily was there, sitting at the kitchen island with a cup of apple juice and a picture book, her little feet swinging off the stool. She was humming something, some song she'd heard at daycare. Vanessa had barely looked at her. Daniel noticed, but he told himself it was nothing. Vanessa wasn't used to children. That was fine. Not everyone was naturally comfortable around toddlers. He didn't read into it. He should have. The second sign came a week later. Vanessa had made a comment about the penthouse smelling like cooking and baby wipes, and laughed like it was a joke. Daniel hadn't laughed. He had changed the subject. And later, alone, he had sat with that small uncomfortable feeling and done what too many people in love do. He had put it in a drawer and closed it. Because Vanessa was wonderful in so many other ways. She was attentive to him. She planned beautiful evenings. She talked about their future in vivid, exciting terms. Homes they would buy, trips they would take, the life they would build. And when she was good, she was so good that the small uncomfortable feelings seemed like nothing. Like paranoia. Like him looking for problems that weren't there. So when Vanessa suggested hosting a small birthday party for Lily at the penthouse, to help Gloria feel appreciated, she said, Daniel had been genuinely moved. He had thought, she's making an effort. She's growing. He had thought, Gloria will love this. He had thought a lot of things that turned out to be wrong. The party was planned for a Saturday afternoon. Pink decorations. A small cake from the bakery down the street. A little balloon arch that the party supply store set up in the living room. Gloria had arrived with Lily in her best dress, yellow with white daisies, and Lily had walked in and stopped at the doorway and stared at the balloons with an expression of absolute wonder, like she had just walked into another world. Daniel had watched that little girl's face and felt something warm and full in his chest. He had no idea what was about to happen. Do you think Vanessa's gesture was genuine? Or was something else going on? Tell us what you think in the comments below. What looks like kindness on the surface isn't always kindness all the way through. The party started beautifully. Lily ran from balloon to balloon, touching each one gently like she was afraid they might disappear. Gloria stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed over her chest in that quiet way she had when she was trying not to show too much emotion. Her eyes were bright. She kept pressing her lips together and looking around the decorated room and then looking at Daniel with a small nod, like she was saying thank you without using any words. Daniel's heart was full. A few other people had been invited. Daniel's assistant, Marco, and his wife. Daniel's neighbor and old friend, Tom, who was loud and funny and made every gathering feel warmer. And a colleague of Vanessa's, a woman named Priya, who arrived 15 minutes late with a gift bag and a glass of white wine already in her hand. It was a small group. Comfortable. The afternoon sun came through the tall penthouse windows and made the whole room golden. Lily ate her finger sandwiches with extreme seriousness, inspecting each one before deciding it was acceptable. She allowed Tom to make her laugh exactly twice before returning to her composed face. She sat in her little yellow dress and held her apple juice with both hands and was, by every measure, the most dignified 3-year-old at any party in Manhattan that afternoon. Vanessa, for her part, played the role of gracious host beautifully. She refilled glasses. She made conversation. She smiled at Gloria from across the room and asked if the decorations were okay and whether Lily was having a good time. On the surface, everything looked right. But Daniel noticed something. It was subtle, the kind of thing you would miss if you weren't paying attention. And Daniel, for all his warmth, was a man who had built a business by paying attention to details other people overlooked. Vanessa's smile, when it turned toward Lily or Gloria, was a fraction of a second too slow. like a light switch that needed a moment to warm up. Everyone else in the room, Marco, his wife, Tom, even Priya, who didn't know anyone, had naturally softened when Lily walked by. They bent down. They used gentle voices. They were drawn in by her the way most people are drawn in by small children who are absolutely certain of their own importance. But Vanessa stayed upright. Her smile never changed temperature. Daniel noted it and said nothing. The party moved along. Music played softly in the background, something cheerful and low that Lily occasionally swayed to, completely unaware of being adorable. Daniel sat on the couch with Tom and pretended to listen to a story about Tom's recent golf trip while actually watching the room, feeling something he couldn't name settle into the back of his mind like a stone dropped into still water. He watched Vanessa stand near the kitchen and talk to Priya in a low voice. He couldn't hear what they were saying. He saw Priya glance at Gloria and then back at Vanessa with a small amused look, and Vanessa tilted her head slightly and said something else, and Priya looked down at her wine glass. Daniel watched that exchange for 3 seconds, then looked away, then looked back, then made himself stop. "You're looking for problems that aren't there," he told himself. "Stop it." He joined the conversation with Tom. An hour passed. Then it was time for the cake. Gloria brought it out from the kitchen. A small round cake, white frosting with pink letters that spelled Lily across the top, and 3 little candles already set in a row. It wasn't a grand cake. It wasn't expensive. It was a bakery cake from the shop 2 blocks away. And it was perfect because it was exactly right for a 3-year-old's idea of what a birthday cake should look like. Lily's eyes went enormous. The whole room gathered around. Someone turned the overhead light down so the candles glowed. Everyone began to sing "Happy Birthday" in that slightly off-key, warmly chaotic way that only happens when a group of adults are genuinely happy and not performing happiness. Gloria stood beside her granddaughter with one hand resting gently on the little girl's back. Lily stared at the candles like she was deciding something very important. The song ended. "Blow them out, baby," Gloria whispered. Lily leaned forward, cheeks puffed, completely focused, and blew with everything she had. All 3 candles went out at once. The room erupted in cheers. Lily looked startled for 1 second and then broke into a grin so big it seemed like it might not fit on her face. Gloria laughed her big room-filling laugh. Tom pumped his fist. Marco's wife said, "Oh my goodness, look at her." And Daniel, standing at the edge of the group, felt something in his chest that he would later describe as the last truly uncomplicated moment of that afternoon. The cake was set on the coffee table. Gloria went to the kitchen to get the little paper plates she'd brought, pink with white stars, because Lily had chosen them herself at the dollar store and considered them a personal achievement. Daniel went to help. That left the room, just for a moment, differently arranged. What happened next took less than 10 seconds. Vanessa's friend Priya made a comment, something about the cake being cute, and Vanessa responded. Daniel didn't hear the words. But Lily, who had been standing right beside the coffee table with both hands pressed flat on the surface, leaning in to inspect the writing on her own cake, looked up at Vanessa's face. And Vanessa looked down at the little girl. And something crossed Vanessa's expression that was gone before anyone could name it properly. Then Vanessa reached out. She picked up the cake. And she moved it. Not to another table. Not to make room for something. She moved it with a purposeful kind of carelessness, a dismissiveness, the way you might move something that is in your way. And the cake tilted, and Lily grabbed for it, and it fell. The cake hit the floor. Lily's birthday cake. The white frosting with the pink letters. The one with the 3 candles still warm from being blown out moments ago. It hit the expensive penthouse floor and broke apart and sat there in pieces. And the room went completely, absolutely silent. Lily stood very still. She looked at the cake on the floor. She looked up at Vanessa. She didn't cry yet. She was 3 years old and she was trying to understand what she was seeing. And that was the moment Gloria walked back in from the kitchen, paper plates in hand, and stopped in the doorway. And that was the moment Daniel turned around. Have you ever witnessed someone show their true character in a single moment like this? Tell us in the comments, we read everyone. And then, in one single heartbeat, everything Daniel thought he knew collapsed. The silence in that penthouse was the kind that has weight. Not the silence of a peaceful room. Not the comfortable quiet between people who trust each other. This was the silence of a room full of people who had just witnessed something and were waiting, breath held, bodies still, to understand what they had seen and what it meant. Daniel stood at the edge of the living room. He had turned when he heard the sound, a soft, terrible thud, and now he was looking at the floor, at the broken cake, at the frosting spread across the imported stone tile, at the pink letters that used to spell Lily now separated and ruined. And then he was looking at Lily herself. Her small yellow-dressed body. Her big eyes. Her little hands hanging at her sides like she didn't know what to do with them. She still hadn't cried. That was the part that broke him. She was 3 years old and she wasn't crying because she was too confused. Because the world, up until this moment, had mostly made sense to her. People were warm. Cake was for celebrating. Birthday parties meant balloons and songs and the people who loved you standing around you making noise. And now the cake was on the floor. And the woman standing closest to it was not looking sorry. Vanessa had taken one small step back. She was holding her wine glass. She hadn't put it down through any of this, and her face had arranged itself into an expression that was almost but not quite an apology. It was the look of someone calculating how much contrition the moment required. "Oh, it slipped," she said. 2 words. Like, breezy. The way you'd talk about bumping into a coffee mug. And Daniel watched Gloria's face. He watched it change. Gloria was a woman who had lived 45 years with grace and restraint. She had weathered things that would have broken people with more cushion. She had raised a child alone and then stepped up to raise that child's child when life made that necessary. She had worked with dignity and shown up with dignity and stood in this penthouse for 7 years and always held herself with quiet, unshakable dignity. But right now, standing in the doorway with pink paper plates in her hands, looking at her granddaughter standing frozen in front of a ruined birthday cake, Gloria's face was doing something Daniel had never seen it do. It was crumbling. Not into tears. Into something worse than tears. Into the look of a woman who had told herself not to expect too much from the world and had been right again, in a way that never stopped hurting. Daniel put down the glass he was holding. He took a breath. He crossed the room. He crouched down in front of Lily, right there on the floor in front of everyone, and he looked at her at eye level the way he always did, the way he had always done because he believed children deserved to be seen straight on and not from above. "Hey, Lilybug," he said very quietly. Her big eyes found his. "I'm going to fix this, okay? The cake got broken, but I'm going to fix it." Her lip wobbled. He held her gaze. "I promise." She nodded, one slow nod, with the gravity of a person making a real agreement. Then Daniel stood up. He turned to face the room. He looked at Marco and Tom and Priya and then he looked at Vanessa, really looked at her, and something in his face had shifted in a way that was quiet but irreversible. The way a lock sounds when it turns. Small click. Permanent. "I need to say something," Daniel said. His voice was calm. It was not raised. It was the voice of a man who had learned that you don't need to be loud when you are completely certain. What happened just now was not an accident. The room pulled tighter. Vanessa blinked. "Daniel, I've been watching tonight," he said. "And I've been watching for weeks. And I have stayed quiet because I wanted to believe I was wrong." He paused. "I wasn't wrong. It was an accident. You didn't look down," he said simply. "When it fell. You didn't look at her." He let that land. A person who drops something by accident looks at the child. "You looked at Priya." Priya went very still. Daniel turned slightly toward her. "And I saw the 2 of you earlier. I don't know what was said. I don't need to know." He looked back at Vanessa. "But I know what I've seen tonight. And I know what I've seen for weeks. And I know who Gloria is to this home and who Lily is to me. His jaw tightened once, then released. I can't marry someone who looks at a 3-year-old child the way you looked at her. The words fell into the room like stones into water. Vanessa's face shifted fast. Through shock, through calculation, through something that looked like real fear for the first time all evening. Daniel, please. I'm not angry at you, he said, and the terrifying thing was that he meant it. I'm just certain. And I've learned not to ignore certainty. He reached into his jacket pocket. The ring box was there. He had been carrying it as a habit ever since the proposal, a strange sentimental thing he couldn't explain. He set it on the side table. Not thrown. Not dramatic. Just placed there, quietly, with the same care he put into everything. The diamond caught the afternoon light and threw one small spark across the ceiling. The room was completely silent. And then Lily, who had been standing very still through all of this, tugged gently on Daniel's sleeve. He looked down. She held up her arms. He picked her up and she rested her small head on his shoulder, and she wrapped her little arms around his neck, and the room, every person in it, felt something shift in the atmosphere, the way the air changes before rain. And that was when Vanessa broke. Not in the way people break when they're sad. In the way people break when they suddenly, for the first time, understand the real consequence of what they have done. The wine glass went onto the side table and she pressed both hands over her mouth and her eyes filled and she looked at Lily. Really looked at her, for possibly the first time all evening, and then she was crossing the room. Not toward Daniel. Toward Gloria. And then, in front of everyone, Vanessa Cole, who had always held herself upright, always controlled the temperature of every room she entered, folded herself down to the floor. At Gloria's feet. And then she turned to Lily, still in Daniel's arms, and she said, in a voice that was nothing like her usual voice, small and raw and stripped of everything performed. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. What would you do if you were in Daniel's place right now? Tell us honestly in the comments. Would you have made the same choice? The hardest moments are not the ones where the world falls apart. They are the ones where you have to decide who you will be in the rubble. Daniel stood very still with Lily on his hip. He watched Vanessa on the floor. He watched Gloria, who had not moved, who stood in the doorway with the paper plates still in her hands. Pink plates with white stars that a 3-year-old had chosen with great personal pride. And he watched her face carefully, because Gloria's face had always told him the true temperature of a room. Gloria was looking at Vanessa. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. With something much more complicated. The look of a woman who has seen too much of the world to find victory in someone else's breakdown. The party guests were frozen. Tom had his hands in his pockets and was studying the floor. Marco and his wife had quietly moved toward each other the way people do when the room becomes uncomfortable. Priya had set her wine glass down and was looking at it. Vanessa was still on her knees. She was not performing now. That was the thing Daniel could see clearly. The thing he would think about later, in the quiet of his apartment after everyone had gone. There was no audience calculation in her face anymore. There was just a woman confronting herself, possibly for the first time, and finding what was there genuinely shocking. I don't know why she started and then stopped. She looked up at Daniel. I don't have a reason. There isn't one. Her voice broke apart. I looked at her and I felt something and I didn't stop it and I should have stopped it. Daniel said nothing. She's 3 years old, Vanessa whispered. She's 3. It was the first honest thing she had said all evening. Lily, from Daniel's shoulder, was watching Vanessa with her serious face, the one that meant she was processing something. Working through it. 3-year-olds are not simple creatures. They understand far more than adults assume. They understand tone. They understand energy. They understand the difference between someone who looks at them and someone who looks past them. After a long moment, Lily looked at Daniel. Then she looked back at Vanessa. Then she said, in her small, clear, completely certain voice, "It's okay." 2 words. The room exhaled. Vanessa pressed her hands over her eyes. Gloria finally moved. She set the paper plates on the side table. Next to the ring box, Daniel noticed, with a small private grief, and she walked to Vanessa and she stood over her and she said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Get up, honey." Her voice was not warm, but it was not cold either. It was the voice of a woman who has spent a lifetime turning the other cheek, not because she was weak, but because she understood something about what bitterness does to a person who holds it too long. Vanessa stood. She was not her polished self. Her mascara was tracked. Her composure was gone. She looked younger without it, and also more real than Daniel had ever seen her look. "I owe you more than an apology," Vanessa said to Gloria. "I know that." Gloria nodded once. "Yes, you do." The guests left not long after. Tom gripped Daniel's shoulder on his way out, a long, silent squeeze that communicated everything he couldn't say. Marco and his wife hugged Gloria. Priya left without speaking to anyone, and Daniel understood that she had her own reckoning to do privately. And then it was just Daniel, Gloria, Lily, and Vanessa. The broken cake was still on the floor. Daniel went to clean it up. He went to the kitchen, got the paper towels and the cleaner, and he came back and he knelt on the floor and he cleaned it up himself. Gloria started to help and he shook his head gently. "I've got it." He cleaned it slowly, carefully, and while he was doing it, he was very aware that Vanessa was standing at the window looking out at the city, and that Lily had gone back to her balloons, touching them one by one, and that the afternoon had gone golden and then amber and was moving toward the soft dark of evening. When the floor was clean, he stood up. He looked at Vanessa. "I meant what I said," he said quietly. She turned from the window. Her face was calm now, a different kind of calm than her usual polish. This was the calm of someone who had already accepted something. "I know," she said. "I don't think you're a bad person," Daniel said. "I genuinely don't. But I think you have things inside you that you haven't looked at. And those things—" He glanced at Lily, now sitting on the floor with a balloon in her lap, perfectly content. "They show up. Especially toward people who can't fight back." Vanessa's eyes filled again. "I want to fix it," she said. "Maybe you will," Daniel said. "But not here. Not with me. That's work you have to do somewhere else." He picked up the ring box from the side table. He held it out to her. She looked at it for a long time. Then she took it. She held it with both hands, and for a moment she just stood there holding it, and Daniel watched her face and saw the full cost of the afternoon moving through her all at once. Not just the engagement, not just Daniel, but the image of herself that she'd always held, the idea of the kind of person she was, cracking open in the light. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know," he said. "Take care of yourself, Vanessa." She nodded once. And then she walked out. The penthouse door clicked shut. Daniel stood in the silence for a moment. Then he felt a small hand on his knee. Lily was standing beside him. She had abandoned her balloon. She was looking up at him with her serious face and her big eyes, and then she held her arms up again. Her universal, unambiguous request. He picked her up. She settled against his chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You want some ice cream, Lilybug?" he asked. She considered this with appropriate gravity. "Yeah," she said. Gloria, from the kitchen doorway, let out a sound that was half laugh, half cry, and pressed her fist to her mouth. Have you ever had to let go of someone you loved because of something they revealed about themselves? Share your story below. You're not alone. Some endings don't arrive all at once. They come quietly, like the last light before dark, and you only understand them looking back. 3 months passed. Manhattan does not stop for heartbreak. The city moves, and the traffic moves, and the coffee shops open every morning and the elevators in the tall buildings go up and up again. And life continues with its magnificent indifference to whatever private devastation is happening behind any given set of closed doors. Daniel Mercer continued to drive himself to work. He sat with the stillness for a while, the particular quiet of a man who has cleared something out of his life and is not yet sure what belongs in the empty space. He was not broken. He was not bitter. He was something more complicated. A person processing the grief of almost, which is its own specific kind of loss. Not the loss of something you had, but the loss of something you thought you were about to have. A future that had felt solid and then turned out to be a hologram. He did not date. He did not fill the hours with noise. He ran in the mornings, he worked long days. He called his mother on Sunday nights. And he sat on his terrace some evenings and looked out at the city and let himself feel whatever was there without hurrying past it. Gloria noticed. She always noticed. 7 years of proximity creates a specific kind of knowing. The knowledge of daily pattern, of small variations, of a person's emotional weather read through the cup of coffee they didn't finish and the light left on in a room they weren't in. She didn't mention it for weeks. She wasn't the kind of woman who pushed. But one morning, about 6 weeks after the party, she stopped in the kitchen doorway while Daniel was sitting at the counter with his coffee and the newspaper he wasn't reading, and she said, "You doing okay, Mr. Daniel?" He looked up. "Honestly. Always." He thought about it. "I think so. I think I am." Gloria nodded slowly. "You made the right call." "I know," he said. "That doesn't always make it easier." "No," she agreed. "But it makes it bearable." She went back to what she was doing. He sat with that for a long time. Bearable. Not healed. Not fixed. Not transformed by revelation into something new and bright. Just bearable, which is, as it turns out, its own kind of gift. Lily turned 4 in the spring. Gloria told him about the birthday when she arrived on a Monday morning in March, mentioning it the way you mention weather. Casually, factually, not making anything of it. Daniel listened. Then he spent 20 minutes on his phone during his lunch break. The following Saturday, he showed up at Gloria's apartment building with a cake from the best bakery in the city. White frosting. Pink letters. He had added at the bottom a tiny fondant balloon, because he had thought about those balloons, the way Lily had moved from one to the other with such reverence that first party afternoon, and he had wanted to give her something that remembered the good part of that day. He had also brought, tucked under his arm, a large stuffed elephant. Not because it was the right thing for a 4-year-old. Simply because when he had walked past the toy store, it had been in the window looking serious and dignified, and it had reminded him of Lily. Gloria opened the door, saw him, and said nothing for a full 3 seconds. Then she stepped back and let him in. Lily was at the small kitchen table with a crayon drawing. She looked up when he entered, and her face did that thing. The thing where the serious expression broke open into a smile that didn't fit quite right, too big for her face, too full of something real. "Daniel," she said, and said his name with a 4-year-old's utter conviction that the world should be as happy as she currently was. He put the cake on the table. He put the elephant in her arms. She held it the way she had held her apple juice at the first party. Carefully with both hands, understanding that it mattered. "Is his name Elephant?" Daniel asked. Lily gave him a look of withering pity. "His name is Gerald," she said. Gloria put the candles on the cake and they sang. Just the 3 of them, in that small apartment kitchen with the afternoon light coming through the window over the sink, and it was nothing like the penthouse party. There were no guests. There was no decor. There was no ring box on the side table catching light. There was just a small girl, and a woman who had shown up for her, and a man who was figuring out, piece by piece, what he actually wanted his life to contain. Lily blew out the 4 candles. All at once, cheeks fully committed. And the room cheered, all 3 of them, loud enough for the neighbors, and Lily picked up Gerald the elephant and made him bow in acknowledgement, and Daniel laughed. Really laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from somewhere unguarded and doesn't ask permission first. Here is the thing about people. We show ourselves eventually. Not always in the big dramatic moments. Sometimes in the small ones, in how we look at a child, in whether we look at all. In what we do when we think no one important is watching. Daniel Mercer had built a fortune by paying attention to the things other people missed. He had never thought that skill would save him personally, but it had. And what he found in the quiet months after the party, in the Sunday morning phone calls and the ice cream runs and the small kitchen birthday, was that the life he had been trying to build toward had actually already been built, in pieces, without his noticing. You don't always lose something and gain something. Sometimes you lose something and find, in the clearing it leaves behind, what was there all along. To you watching this right now, the people who show you who they are in the small moments, believe them. Whether what they show you is beautiful or ugly, believe them. Because the truth of a person is not in what they say when everything is easy. It is in what they do when they think it doesn't count. Thank you for sitting with this story today. We hope it gave you something. Maybe just the reminder that real goodness exists, that small kindnesses matter, and that a 3-year-old named Lily, with her serious face and her enormous heart, can teach a room full of adults something none of them were expecting to learn. Take care of yourselves. And look after the small ones. If this story moved you, if any part of it sat with you in a way you didn't expect, please hit that like button. It genuinely helps us keep making stories like this, and it takes 1 second. Subscribe if you want more real human stories every week. Stories about love, loss, courage, and the small moments that reveal who we truly are. This community grows one heart at a time, and we're so glad you're part of it. Now tell us in the comments. What part of this story hit you hardest? Was it Lily blowing out the candles? Daniel's quiet words to Vanessa? Or something else entirely? We read every single comment. Everyone. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about second chances and quiet grace today, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need. Until next time, be kind. Costs nothing and it means everything.